What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video. It's been a little bit over 2 weeks since Mythical Island has released, so we have a lot more data to go off of the current meta. We're going to be taking a look at a meta report tier list. This is coming from Pokemon TCGpocket.gg. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I just really like how they put this data together. So I'm going to leave a link down to the website down in the description below if you want to check it out for yourself. So let's hop into the tier list. First off, real quick, I wanted to show their explanation of the tier list. It's mainly going based off of tournament data, tournament toppings, and winnings. Tier 1 are going to be the best decks in the game right now. Tier 2 are going to be popular meta decks that still have some good matchups, but just may not be as strong as Tier 1. Tier 3 is going to be the more like middle of the pack decks that are still decent, but they not be getting a lot of tournament toppings or tournament winnings. And then tier 4 are going to be the less popular off meta decks that might show up in tournaments every now and then, but they're most likely not going to be winning any tournaments. So with that explanation out of the way, let's hop into the tier list. Starting off with tier 1, we have Mewtwo EX here, of course, and what we're going to be showing the deck list here are going to be the most popular versions of the decks. Of course, you know, people can make some slight changes with a couple cards here and there, but I would say the decks shown in this tier list are going to be the most popular versions, and I'm going to have every deck timestamp in the description down below if you want to jump back into any specific deck at any point throughout this video. So with the Mewtwo EX deck, right, not much has changed here. We got 2 Mewtwo EX, 2 of the Gardevoir lines, 1 Mew EX, 1 Sabrina, 1 Leaf, 2 Research, 2 Slab, 2 Potion, 1 X Speed, and 2 Pokeballs. So it's essentially the same list, except we are now running one of Mew EX. Prior to Mythical Island, people were running the non-EX Mewtwo as a shield, but Mew EX is an even better shield since it has a higher HP count at 130. It can attack for 1 energy for 20 damage, and genome hacking can copy your opponent's Pokemon's big moves, which can be really nice as well, and it has a retreat cost of 1. We have Leaf here in case we need to retreat our Mewtwo EX. We can retreat it for free. And Mythical Slab is probably the card that just puts this deck all together and makes it even better because it just makes it more consistent. One of the biggest problems with this deck before was finding the Gardevoir evolution line with Ralts, Kirlia, and Gardevoir. But with Mythical Slab, we are able to filter through the deck faster in order to find that combination. And once Gardevoir is online, you're doing 150 damage with Mewtwo EX each turn, and you're going to be one-shotting most of the Pokemon within the game. Next up in tier 1, we have Pikachu EX. Now, there are several different versions of this deck, but I would say the Zebstrika version is the most common version at this point, and the biggest reason for that is because it counters Gyarados EX. Since Gyarados needs to evolve from Magikarp, which only has 30 HP, people are going to want to hide Magikarp in their bench so it doesn't get KO'd immediately. But with Zebstrika, you can go first and you can evolve first, attack for 1 energy with the Zebstrika, and snipe that Magikarp. So I do believe this is the best version of Pikachu EX at the moment. It's running 2 Pikachu EX, 2 Zapdos EX, still just a really good card, right? Can serve as a tank, can also do some nice chip damage. And the fact that Zapdos is weak to lightning means that this deck doesn't completely get cooked by fighting decks, since the rest of the cards in the deck are weak to fighting type Pokemon. 2 Blitzel, 2 Zebstrika, 1 Dedenne. I'm still not a big fan of this card, but I could see why you can include 1 copy of it. Sometimes it's just a last resort to try and paralyze your opponent's Pokemon to buy yourself some extra time and turn around the game and come back and win. And then we have 2 Giovanni, 1 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Potion, 2 Speed, and 2 Pokeballs. Pretty standard Pikachu EX deck list here. Again, I think a Zebstrika version is the strongest version since it counters those Gyarados EX decks. Lastly, in tier 1, we have Gyarados EX. Now, I think this deck has fallen off slightly. It's still one of the best decks in the game, if not the best deck in the game. We're running 2 of the Greninja lines, 2 of the new Mythical Island Magikarp, 2 Gyarados EX, 2 Druddigon, 2 Misty, 2 Leaf, 2 Research, and 2 Pokeball. So pretty simple, solid list. Essentially, you just want to have your Druddigon up front, tank some damage for you while you build up your Magikarp into Gyarados in the back line, and you build up Froakie into Greninja into the back line. Of course, Misty is still an insanely busted card. If you can flip even one heads, I mean, it's just so good, right? And then with Gyarados EX, 140 damage, you're clearing a lot of Pokemon in the game with 140 damage. Plus, you have the Greninja to do some chip damage as well with the Water Shuriken. And then Druddigon with its Rough Skin ability is going to do 20 damage to the opposing Pokemon whenever it's attacked. So this deck is still very powerful. Now, with the top 3 decks in Tier 1 right now, Mewtwo EX, Pikachu EX, and Gyarados EX, we find ourselves in a rock, paper, scissors format, which is actually a good thing, right? I would say this meta is actually very diverse. It's very healthy because one deck beats another. So Mewtwo EX is going to beat Pikachu EX, Pikachu EX is going to beat Gyarados EX, and Gyarados EX is going to beat Mewtwo EX. Now, of course, you know, things might change depending on things within the game, such as what cards you draw, your starting hand, things like that, and maybe slight variations throughout deck lists, but that is the general consensus right now with the meta that we find ourselves in. And that's it for Tier 1. Let's go ahead and move on to Tier 2. So in Tier 2, we have a Charizard EX deck. Charizard EX was one of the best decks in the game prior to Mythical Island. It's fallen off a little bit, but it's still really good. The biggest problem with this deck, I would say, is the consistency, since it is a Stage 2 evolution Pokemon. But with that, we do run 1 copy of Growlithe and 2 Arcanine EX, and sometimes you don't actually need to build up your Charizard EX for 200 damage. Sometimes Arcanine EX can just get the job done by himself. It's a little bit faster since Arcanine EX is a Stage 1 evolution, and it takes 3 energy to attack compared to Charizard EX, which is a Stage 2 and requires 4 energy for its biggest attack. And then, of course, we have Moltres EX here, which is just really good at ramping fire energy and tanking some damage. 1 Sabrina, 1 Leaf, 2 Research, 1 Potion, 2x Speed, and 2 Pokeball. So still a very strong deck. I think people are just kind of moving away from this one a little bit more. Since Charizard is a Stage 2 evolution Pokemon, it is a little bit slower and it can be a little bit tougher when you don't find the evolutions you need. I have seen some people run different variations of this deck, including Fossils and Chatot, to try and make it more consistent. I haven't seen a ton of tournament data on that version of the deck specifically, so I'm not 100% sold on that version of the deck, but we'll have to wait and see if that version will get some more tournament topping soon. Next up in Tier 2, we have Arcanine EX, which has 2 Growlithe, 2 Arcanine EX, 2 Moltres EX, pretty similar to the Charizard deck so far. And then we're running 1 copy of Mew EX. We're going to see a lot of Mew in these decks because Mew can literally just fit into any deck, right? You're not running Psychic Energy with this deck, you're just running the fire energy, and you can use genome hacking with your Mew and copy opponents' moves, such as copying a Gyarados EX, copying a Mewtwo EX, a Charizard EX, right? There's a lot of really powerful moves in the game that you can copy with just 3 energy. Then we got 2 Giovanni, 1 Sabrina, 1 Leaf, 2 Research, 2 Potion, 2 Speed, 2 Pokeball, and 1 Red Card. Now, since these are tournament decks, we're probably going to be seeing more Red Cards here. Red Card, I will say, is more of a tournament-specific card. If you are playing with open deck lists, right, you can kind of see what your opponent is playing and, you know, decide if you want to reshuffle their hand or not. Red Card, I probably wouldn't recommend playing on the ladder. I would probably just rather have like something else, like another Sabrina. And this deck is going to be really good into Celebi, since Arcanine EX can one-shot Celebi. Celebi has 130 HP, Arcanine does 120 damage, but with the grass weakness, it pushes itself to 140 damage. So this is really good to go against Celebi decks. And speaking of Celebi, the next deck we have in Tier 2 is Celebi EX. Now, when the expansion first dropped, people thought this card was insanely busted, and it is good, but I don't think it is insanely busted. as it, people thought it was going to be. We have two Celebi, two of the superior lines, which essentially just doubles your grass energy. So example, if you have 2 energy attached to Celebi, it's really going to be 4 energy, and you're doing 4 coin flips, and you're doing 50 damage for each of those heads. The problem with Celebi is that it is a coin flip card, right? Even though you can increase your odds the more energy you put onto Celebi, there's still going to be those times where you get unlucky coin flips. So I think that is why people have moved away from this deck a little bit in favor of some more consistent decks that do not rely on coin flips. And we are running 1 copy of Delmise, which I'm a big fan of this card. It's a basic Pokemon, 100 HP, so it can serve as a decent tank for you. It attacks for 1 energy for 20 damage, but if it has 4 grass energy on it, it's going to be attacking for 90 damage. So essentially, if you have the superior online, you can put just 2 energy onto Delmise and you're attacking for 90 damage. I really like this card a lot. I think people should play it more, in my opinion. It does have a retreat cost of 2, but we are running 1 copy of Leaf to help offset that. Then we are running 1 potion, 1 XP, 2 Pokeballs, 2 Ericas. I think Erica is a must in any grass type of deck. 1 Giovanni, 1 Sabrina, and then of course the 1 Leaf and 2 Research. So Celebi EX, still a solid deck, is just really kind of tough to win against those fire type decks, right? Which are becoming a little bit more popular again, which are Charizard EX and Arcanine EX. So Celebi, still a very solid deck, but it is a tier 2 deck and not a tier 1 deck. And real quick before we move on to the next deck, there is another version of Celebi EX that has been gaining more popularity, and this is the Executor version. So this one runs 2 Execute, 2 Executor EX, 2 Celebi EX, only 1 Snivy, 2 Servine, 2 Superior, 2 Erica, 1 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Speed, and 2 Pokeball. So Executor EX is still one of, if not the best Pokemon in the game for going first. You can evolve first, attach 1 energy, and then attack for 40 to potentially 80 damage depending on the coin flip. It has 160 HP, so it can tank a lot of hits. Combined with Erica, you can heal that Pokemon for 50. So Executor EX is still very good, and I've seen people play around with the new Executor that scales depending on how much energy is attached to your opponent's Pokemon, similar to Jinx. So this version is becoming a little bit more popular. People are kind of moving away from the version we saw previously and moving towards the Executor EX, but you guys let me know, which version do you think of this deck is better? All right, next up we have Aerodactyl EX. Now, this deck I am a big fan of, but I will say I actually do not agree with this version of the deck. So I made a video on this deck a while back, and in my version of the deck, I'm not running Mew, and I'm not running this Mankey in Primeape. In my opinion, I think I would rather run either the new Mankey that relies on the coin flip or the genetic Apex Mankey that does a flat 20 damage, and then run the Primeape that attacks for 1 energy, because for 1 energy, it does 50 damage. It makes the matchup going first very good. And then also I would run 1 copy of Marshadow and 1 copy of Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee is going to be able to snipe those Magikarps on the bench, and then Marshadow is just a really good basic Pokemon, attacking for 100 damage for just 2 energy. The rest of the deck looks pretty good to me. I just don't agree with this Mankey personally, and the Primeape and the Mew. I would run Aerodactyl and then the Hitmonlee, Marshadow, and then the other Mankey and the other Primeape. But with that being said, I think this deck is still really good. I think people undervalued Aerodactyl EX at first. So Aerodactyl EX has an ability: your opponent can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their active Pokemon. This deck is running 2 copies of Sabrina, so you can kind of manipulate their active spot and their bench to kind of play around with Aerodactyl's ability. I don't think this ability is like amazing, right? But it's still a good ability. It still can be annoying. I think, you know, most decks are going to want to evolve their Pokemon on the bench and not in the active spot, but this is still a good ability nonetheless. And the Aerodactyl doesn't even have to be active for this ability to work. He can just be chilling on the bench and his ability will still be in effect. And to add to that, Aerodactyl only attacks for 2 energy for 80 damage. He retreats for 1, and he is weak to lightning, whereas most other fighting type Pokemon are going to be weak to either psychic or grass. So having a different weakness type for Aerodactyl EX makes this deck a little bit better in some matchups. Next, we got a Scolipede Weezing deck. Now, I will say, I think I undervalued Scolipede a lot. I will say that is one card I was wrong about. I don't think Scolipede was that good when the card, you know, first came out and the expansion was still brand new. But, you know, I will admit I was wrong. Scolipede is actually pretty good. I don't think it's like an amazing card, but it is pretty decent nonetheless, right? It's a stage 2 dark type evolution Pokemon. It attacks for only 2 energy, deals 70 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is poison, this attack does 50 more damage. So that's 120 damage if your opponent's active Pokemon is poison. And its evolution before that, Whirlipede, does poison your opponent's active Pokemon. And then, of course, you have Weezing, which I think is still one of the best cards in the game. Just having an ability to poison your opponent's Pokemon for free every turn, having 110 HP, being able to tackle for 30 damage for 1 energy, and you can pull him back with the Koga, so he can tank some damage for you. Pull him back with Koga, and you don't even lose a point. And then in the deck, we are also running a 1-of Tauros. I think this is a good card as a 1-of to include into some of these decks where you're not running EX Pokemon, just to counter other EX Pokemon decks, because Tauros is going to do 120 damage to EX Pokemon. And then we are running 1 copy of Sabrina, 2 copies of Leaf, 2 Research, and 2 Pokeball. So this is going to be good into those Psychic type decks, since Psychic Pokemon are weak to Darkness type Pokemon. All in all, I think this is a decent deck. It's definitely like lower tier 2, but it's still a decent deck nonetheless. And now we have a Golem deck. So we got a lot of variety with fighting type Pokemon, which I love because I think fighting type decks are probably like one of the most fun to play right now in Pokemon TCG Pocket. There's so many different things you can do with fighting type decks at the moment. So this one is running 2 Geodude of the Genetic Apex one, the one that attacks for 1 energy. It runs 2 of the new Graveler, which attacks for 2 energy, and then 2 of the new Golem, which attacks for 4 energy, 120 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes minus 30 damage from attacks. So with this line, if you have Brock, you can potentially attack with all of these Pokemon on curve. If you're going second, you attack with Geodude for 1 energy, attack with Graveler for 2 energy, then evolve into Golem, give Golem 1 energy, and then give him another energy from Brock, and then you're able to attack with 4 energy. So this card is just really tanky. It can survive a lot of hits in the game. It could take 2 to 3 hits to kill the Golem, and since it is a non-EX Pokemon, it is only worth 1 price point, which is very good as well. It's just going to be bad into the Celebi matchup, unfortunately, since it is weak to grass, and it does have a pretty high retreat cost of 3, but we are running 2 Leaf in this deck. And then, of course, we are running 1 Hitmonlee, 1 Marshadow. I really like 1-of Hitmonlee and Marshadow in pretty much any fighting deck right now. I think both those cards are just so good to not include into any fighting deck. And then we're running 2 copy of Druddigon, just a really good tank to throw in the front line whenever we want to build up our Golem in the back. 1 copy of Giovanni, that's going to push our Golem from 120 to 130 damage. That's going to one-shot things like Mew EX and Celebi EX. And then 2 copies of Brock to ramp energy for our Golem, 2 Leaf, 2 Research, 1 Potion, and 2 Pokeball. So yeah, I don't think this deck is as strong as Aerodactyl EX. I think this is a little bit weaker since it's a little bit slower because Golem takes 4 energy and it is a stage 2 evolution, but I think it's still a pretty decent deck. All right, and now we're moving on to tier 3. So first off, we have Blaine here, and I think Blaine is still okay. It can win games like very fast if everything goes right for you. But I think the problem is that this deck is weak to water, which there are a lot of water decks in the meta right now. You have a lot of people playing Gyarados. There are still people playing things like Articuno, Starmie EX, Greninja. So water is just pretty prevalent in the meta right now. So I think this is why you don't see this deck as often, but it is good into the Celebi matchup, since Ninetales combined with the Blaine can one-shot Celebi EX. And then we have a new Ponyta and a new Rapidash. So the new Ponyta does 10 damage, but then you flip a coin. If heads, this attack does 30 more damage for 40 damage. I think it depends if you like the coin flips or not. You can run this Ponyta or the other one that does a flat 20 damage. I think they're both about equal. I don't think it makes that big of a difference as to which one you run. And then with the new Rapidash, I think this Rapidash is better than the one we have. The other Rapidash is good for going first since it only takes 1 energy to attack. But I think for 1 energy more, it is worth it to run this Rapidash. It has 100 HP. For 2 energy, it does 40 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, this attack does 60 more damage. So that is 100 damage total. And then if you add Blaine onto that, that's 130 damage. So yeah, you can output some crazy damage with this deck very fast. For the rest of the cards in the deck, we got 2 Blaine, 2 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Potion, 2 Speed, 2 Pokeball. Pretty standard Blaine deck, I would say. Maybe you just want to add like a 1 of Magmar in here somewhere. But overall, yeah, I think it's a decent deck. Gonna be good into those grass type matchups, but just not very good right now since there are a lot of water decks on the ladder. Next up in tier 3, we got another fighting type deck. This is actually a pretty spicy one. So we're running 2 Hitmonlee, 2 Farfetch'd, 1 Mew EX, 2 Marshadow, and 1 Tauros. So I believe this deck is not running any psychic energy. I believe it's just running fighting type energy. This is a very aggressive deck, right? So the Farfetch is actually really good with the Marshadow. So Farfetch is a basic Pokemon that's going to attack for 1 energy for 40 damage, but it's very squishy with 60 HP. So it's going to get KO'd very fast. But we actually don't mind that because we're running 2 Marshadow in this deck. So Marshadow is going to do 100 damage whenever one of your Pokemon is KO'd for just 2 energy. So you can deal some fast damage with the Farfetch'd. Once he gets KO'd, Marshadow comes in, deals 100 damage. You have Hitmonlee to deal with those Magikarps in the back, and any other weak Pokemon that your opponent might retreat onto the bench. You have Mew EX to serve as a tank as well as that genome hacking. And then you have Tauros as a tech card against EX Pokemon. We're running 2 copies of Giovanni here. That'll push the Tauros to 130 damage, which will one-shot opposing Mew EXs and Celebi EXs. 2 Sabrina, 1 Leaf, 2 Research, 1 Potion, 2 Speed, and 2 Pokeball. So if you like playing really aggressive decks, really fast decks, I think this is going to be one that you want to try out for yourself. Next, we got Starmie EX, and I think Starmie EX is still really good, actually. I think people have kind of just fallen off of this because it plays all the old cards, right? People want to play the new stuff. They want to play Gyarados EX, right? So that's why Gyarados EX is seeing a lot of play, but Starmie EX is still really good. Being able to attack for 2 energy, 90 damage is a lot of damage with a free retreat cost. Articuno EX is still an insanely good card, plus Greninja being able to do chip damage every turn with that Water Shuriken ability. And then with the Misty, if you high roll Misty with this deck, you're just winning the game, right? Like if you get an extra energy with Starmie EX and you can attack a turn earlier with it, like you're just winning the game that way. Or if you high roll onto Articuno EX, you'd get Blizzard online right away. Like it's just insane. So this deck does kind of rely on Misty a lot, but I think even if you do get Tails with your Misty, this deck is still really solid. And then we're also running 2 Sabrina, 2 Research, and 2 Pokeballs. I will say most notably is there are no X Speeds or Leaf in this deck. I guess Leaf doesn't make sense since the only Pokemon with 2 retreat cost is Articuno, but I don't know. I would maybe want like 1 or 2 X speed. I mean, Starmie EX does retreat for free, and then Greninja retreats for 1, Articuno EX retreats for 2. So I guess it makes sense, but part of me might miss 1 or 2 X speed in this deck. Next, we have an Articuno Greninja deck. This is actually kind of similar to the Starmie version, except there's no Starmie line in this one. It is running 1 basic Articuno, and I actually really like that basic Articuno because it has 100 HP, retreats for 1, so it can serve as a good tank for you. For 3 energy, it does Ice Beam for 60 damage. And then you flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed. So potentially paralyzing your opponent's active Pokemon while also doing 60 damage is very powerful. You're also running 2 Misty, 2 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Speed, 2 Pokeball, and 1 red card. Again, in a tournament format, we're going to be seeing more red cards. On ladder, I would recommend swapping out red card for something else. It could probably be something else like a potion or another basic Articuno or Giovanni blue, whatever you think fits. And next up, we got a Marowak EX deck. So I think Marowak EX is still a good card. The only thing is that it relies on coin flips. For 2 energy, you're going to flip 2 coins and do 80 damage for each head. So this can do 0 damage, 80 damage, or 160 damage. And yeah, I think a lot of these coin flip cards you're going to see towards the bottom of the tier list, since people are going to want to rely on more consistent Pokemon. We are running 2 Sand Slash as well, which I really like Sand Slash. Just attacking for 70 damage for 2 energy, 100 HP is really nice. And we have 2 Farfetch'd. So this is a very aggressive deck, right? All it is just putting energy on your Pokemon and just start swinging right away. Then we have the 1 Giovanni, 1 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Potion, 2 XP, 2 Pokeball. So yeah, I think this is going to be one of the weaker fighting decks. I would rather just play Aerodactyl or Golem or maybe even Machamp. But if you like playing Marowak, I think this is it's still a decent deck. Next up, we have a Wigglytuff EX and Weezing deck. So Wigglytuff EX and Weezing pair really nice together since you can inflict poison with the Weezing, inflict sleep with the Wigglytuff EX, and those 2 status effects do actually stack. So your opponent's Pokemon can be poisoned and asleep at the same time, which is actually a pretty deadly combination, right? Because usually you want to retreat your Pokemon to get rid of the poison, but if they're asleep, they cannot retreat, so they cannot shake off the poison. I think this version of the deck has fallen off in favor of the Scolipede version we have seen earlier, but I still think this is a pretty decent deck. I still think Wigglytuff EX is a pretty good card here. We're also running 2 of the basic Wigglytuff, which I like this card as well. It actually plays better into your curve. If you're going second, you can attack for 1 energy with Jigglypuff and then 2 energy on the non-EX Wigglytuff. So I actually like the basic Wigglytuff as well. I don't know if I would include 2 of each though, with just 2 Jigglypuff and then, 4 evolved forms. That kind of seems a little overkill. Maybe go like 2 Wigglytuff EX and 1 basic Wigglytuff, or 1 of each. I think 2 and 2 is a little bit overkill. We are running 1 Kangaskhan, and Kangaskhan, I'm just not a big fan of this card. I really wasn't a big fan of this card before, but even now with Druddigon, I think Druddigon is just way better. I would rather just run Druddigon instead of Kangaskhan personally. And then we do have 2 of the promo Jigglypuff, which just puts your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep. 2 Koga, 1 Giovanni, 2 Sabrina, 2 Research, and 2 Pokeball. So this deck, I think it's decent, but this exact deck list, I'm not a big fan of, to be honest. I don't like that there's 2 Wigglytuff EX and 2 basic Wigglytuff, and I don't like the Kangaskhan. What I would probably do is take out maybe 1 of the Wigglytuff, 1 of the Wigglytuff EX, depending on how you want to split that, right? Take out the Kangaskhan, put in Druddigon, and maybe put in a Leaf somewhere as well, because Leaf pairs really nicely with Druddigon. So yeah, I like this deck, just not this specific version personally. Next up, we have Venusaur EX, which Venusaur EX, I think, is just not very good. I have tried to make Venusaur good. Believe me, I have played so many games offline with Venusaur and even the non-EX version of Venusaur, but it's just not that good. Like, you would probably just rather play Celebi. Problem is, Venusaur is a stage 2 evolution Pokemon, so it is a bit slow, and it does 100 damage for 4 energy, which is not that great, right? Like some other attacks are going to be doing more damage for less energy, and it does heal 30 damage from him, but sometimes that's not even gonna matter. Like for example, if you're going up against a Charizard EX, Charizard just one-shots Venusaur, so healing 30 does not even matter at all. So yeah, Venusaur, I think it's just not that good. Unfortunately, I think it's just very, very slow. We are also running 2 Execute, 2 Basic Executor, and 1 Executor EX. I think this is still the way to go with the Venusaur deck. If you do want to play Venusaur, Executor EX just serves as a good tank while you build up the Venusaur in the backline. And then we have 2 Erica, 1 Sabrina, 2 Research, 1 Potion, 1 Speed, and 2 Pokeball. So unfortunately, I don't think Venusaur is very good at the moment, but I do think this version of the deck is pretty decent. And we got another fighting type deck here with Machamp EX. Now Machamp, I think this should be a little bit higher up in my opinion. I'm still a big fan of Machamp. I think this deck is really good because you have a game plan for going first and going second. So if you're going first, you have Diglett into Dugtrio. You can evolve into Dugtrio, attack for 1 energy. Flip a coin. If heads, that Dugtrio is essentially going to be invincible for a turn, so it can help stall. Instead of Diglett and Dugtrio, you can also play Mankey and the new Primeape, which attacks for 1 energy. And then if you're going second with this deck, you can play into Machop. You can attack on curve with each form of Machop. For Machop, attacks for 1 energy, Machoke attacks for 2 energy, and then Machamp EX attacks for 3 energy. I still think Machamp EX is a really good card. I would like to see this a little bit higher on the tier list personally. And then other cards in the deck are running Giovanni. Giovanni is going to push Machamp EX to 130 damage, which is that magic number that kills Mew and Celebi. 1 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Potion, 2 Speed, and 2 Pokeball. So I'm still a big fan of Machamp EX. I really like this deck. I think you could swap out the Diglett and Dugtrio for Mankey and Primeape if you want to as well. All right, moving on to tier 4. So this is the bottom tier. These are going to be the less popular off meta decks. And starting off with tier 4, we have Arbok Weezing. I think this deck has essentially just fallen off completely in favor of the Weezing Scolipede version. Arbok does trap your opponent's Pokemon, so you can poison them with Weezing, pull it back with Koga, and then trap them with Arbok so they can't retreat to escape the poison. But I think Scolipede is just a stronger version of this deck, so not too much else to say about this one unless you really like Team Rocket for some reason and you want to play a Weezing Arbok deck. Here you go, but I think in most scenarios I'd rather just play Scolipede or Wigglytuff EX instead. Next up, we got a Dragonite deck for all you Dragonite enjoyers out there. I think this version is a little bit outdated. It is running Hypno, which essentially you just want to run him for the ability, right? You're not running Psychic Energy. You're just using it to put your opponent's Pokemon to sleep so you can stall to build up your Dragonite, Meowth to draw some cards for consistency. I think this deck is a little bit outdated though because people are now running Druddigon with Dragonite, which makes a lot more sense. So yeah, this version of this deck is slightly outdated. But yeah, I think if you want to play Dragonite, you can kind of use this as a base. Maybe take out Red Card, take out the Drowsy Hypno, throw in Druddigon, and throw in some Leaf. Next in tier 4, we have Blastoise EX and Starmie EX. I will say, I think Blastoise EX is a little bit better than where this tier list puts him. I would at least put him in tier 3. I think Blastoise is still pretty good. Again, it is kind of going to live and die by the Misty coin flips. But with Blastoise EX, you're dealing 40 damage for 2 energy, 100 damage for 3 energy, and then if you have 5 energy on him, you're dealing 160 damage. So I think Blastoise EX is still really good personally. I just don't think it's as popular as Gyarados EX, since Gyarados is a stage 1 evolution and deals 140 damage for just 4 energy, whereas with Blastoise you need that 5 energy for the 160 damage. And then you're also running Starmie EX as sort of as a backup plan in case you don't draw everything for your Blastoise EX here. And then the 2 Misty, 1 Sabrina, 2 Research, 2 Potion, 1 X Speed, and 2 Pokeball. Again, I think Blastoise is a little bit better than this tier list gives him credit for. But, you know, I don't know if I would say this is the best version of Blastoise right now. I don't even know if we have a quote-unquote optimized version of Blastoise at the moment. There's so many different things you can run in water decks, right? You can do Blastoise Starmie, Blastoise Articuno, Blastoise Greninja, right? So there's a bunch of different things you can do. I think maybe we haven't found the perfect Blastoise deck just yet, but if you guys have a pretty good Blastoise deck, let me know, and I'd like to hear from you. And lastly, on the tier list, we have Alakazam here. Now, again, I think this version of this deck is slightly outdated as well, since it is running 2 Clefairy, 2 Clefable, which I still really like that card, but the version I featured on my channel recently with the LGM and the BEM, I personally think is better. It is running 1 copy of Farfetch'd as well for some early aggressive damage. Alakazam is just going to punish those decks that have a lot of energy on them, right? So it's going to be like Gyarados decks with the Misty High Rolls, or it's going to be Celebi Superior decks. Alakazam is going to be really good in those matchups, but it is a stage 2 evolution, so it is a little bit slow, and in some matchups it's not going to be as great of a card where they don't run a lot of energy onto their Pokemon. And he has only 130 HP for a stage 2, which is not a whole lot. And this version of the deck is not running Mythical Slab. I think Mythical Slab should be played in pretty much every Psychic deck. That card is just too good not to, right? So I think this particular version of the deck is slightly outdated. I recommend you guys check out the video I did on Alakazam recently on my channel and run that version instead of this one. But regardless, I think Psychic type Pokemon in general are in a pretty good spot in the meta right now, just because Mythical Slab exists and that card is just so good. So Alakazam, still a decent deck to play, but not a top meta contender. So that is it for the tier list. Let me know what you guys think about this tier list. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? I think I would agree with most of it. Some of the decks I think were slightly outdated towards the bottom of the tier list. A couple versions of decks I wasn't like a big fan of, but overall I would say that I agree with most of this tier list, especially with Mewtwo, Pikachu, and Gyarados being in tier 1. Those are the 3 decks that are kind of shaping the meta, where all the other decks kind of revolve around those 3 decks, right? So let me know what you guys think about this tier list, and let me know what you think about this format. If you have any feedback from me on how you want me to do these tier list videos, you know, I would appreciate any feedback. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. Do consider liking and subscribing. It would really help me a ton. I want to see if we can get to 3,000 subscribers. I've kind of been in the 2,000 range for a while, so if we can hit 3,000, I would be super happy. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you, and see you in the next one. Later.